the FDI policies changes, the IBC code and other statutory regulatory reforms that this government has done is to enable businesses to do well and also to ensure that the investors make money and we're able to protect them and give and protect their interest. And I think that has been a great source of encouragement. Yesterday in the news, we were talking about the second REIT listing and we saw 13x, which not so many people were expecting. And just 3 months ago, with work from home discussion at all-time high and majority of people working from home, people concluded that perhaps commercial real estate will cease to exist or it will come down dramatically. And that has not happened. And that is visible, not only institutional investors, but also Indian retail investors, HNIs, have put their faith in the second REIT listing. And therefore, we will not be too far away when the third listing happens early next year, taking the total listed real estate portfolio of office to 100 million square feet. And in not so distant future, I expect another 200 to 300 million square feet getting listed at the stock exchange, giving a wonderful opportunity for retail investors instead of speculating in hard asset purchase, which was detrimental to the industry and speculative in nature. They will now have steady flow of rental yields through dividends, which are tax-free to the extent of 6% and 7% at a time when interest rates are all-time low and risk and volatility of many other investment avenues seems high. So I'm optimist, but also realist, benchmarking my conclusions on the basis of few examples that I've given. I believe there will be a consolidation, and that relates to the discussion of our strategy, a complete revival. And the complete revival, in some of my earlier webinars, used to say there will be a consolidation in tier 2 and tier 3 developers. I'm making this bold statement today that the consolidation is equally going to be in the tier 1 developers. And why not? Because we have 3 to 4 billion US dollar chasing opportunities in India. So don't be surprised that there is a consolidation, and which from the medium to long term is for the benefit of the industry. There'll be more organized players with far better governance, far better transparency and professional management than you would see in the past. So I'm very hopeful that you will have this very good quality discussion and engagement in this session, and your key takeaways from today's discussion will be meaningful and help you understand the sector and roll out your strategies effectively in the times to come. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to Kunal Shah, and I'm going to step out for an engagement with Mr. Puri in my next FICCI session. Thank you very much, Nirja.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dutt, and thank you for your time to join us. And hope your next session also goes well. So I'll just take off from where Mr. Dutt sort of left. It seems like, and Mr. Dutt and I were in a physical conference in March this year, when we were still talking at that point of time about stress in the real estate industry and what we can do about it. In the past 2-3 years, it seems like we are we are surfing from crisis to crisis as far as the real estate industry is concerned, as opposed to crisis to opportunity. But one of the themes that I want to discuss during this session is, where do the opportunities lie in spite of this crisis, and how do we exploit those opportunities? And hopefully come to some sort of positive conclusion also, as opposed to, we are all aware of the problems, and, we have a very esteemed panel. It would be great to hear their thoughts on where the opportunity lies and how do we explore that opportunity. Mr. Dutt mentioned that foreign investors are going to play a big role in the next, 18 months to 2 years.
Shelly? Hello?
I think Kunal dropped.
Give us just 2 minutes. Shelly,
I think I got disconnected. Am I back online now?
you're back.
Apologies, I got disconnected. So what I was going to say is I'm going to start with Mr. Mukherjee to give his input on, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are.
So Mr. Mukherjee, your input on how do we revive consumer sentiment at this stage? And, what do the government, the RBI and the banks together and developers as a community, how do we get confidence back in people to buy apartments and to start, renting business spaces? It would be great to hear your thoughts on that.
I can speak from an investor's point of view. I think confidence is a function of capital, and capital comes in two forms, growth capital and solution capital. And I think our sector needs both. Fortunately for us, we are seeing an inflow of both. Growth capital comes in the form of REIT getting subscribed 13 times over. It also comes in with pension funds, the Canadians and the others still actively looking for and buying yield-bearing assets. Also, I think there is a knock-on effect of announcements by folks like Google, etc., that they will kind of put more warm bodies in India and continue to use India as a critical growth engine for their own plans. Warm bodies need to be housed somewhere, whether it's homes or offices. And then there is the other part, which is solution capital, which is more firms like ours. And that's the domain of firms like ourselves, where there is already a significant amount of capital, cement, steel, blocked in projects that are at various stages of development. And due to the earlier dislocation by the NBFCs and liquidity getting sucked out, and the current COVID dislocation, for a variety of reasons, these projects are blocked, capital is blocked, and a lot of prime real estate is non-productive. So I think the minute capital comes in to grow the economy, to grow jobs, demand will come in both for office and for residential, projects coming online and consumers buying. That is on the longer term, but on the shorter term, I think solution capital will try and unlock the locked value which is there in office projects which are incomplete or stuck, residential projects which are incomplete or stuck, so that inventory can come online faster, because these are approved projects at various stages of completion already. I think a combination of these two will resolve the supply side issues in the shorter and the medium term. And frankly, it's interesting trends. People are buying larger homes, even if it is a little further away from the city, just because they now believe that they need to have an extra bedroom as a home office. So they are willing to go a little further out within the same budget. And I also believe I worked in the technology sector in a past life. Eventually, I think the kids and the youngsters want the social interaction of an office. As soon as medical science and the industry comes up with a solution, and I'm confident they will, I think offices will be back in fashion, and we will see a healthy combination of the two going forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mukherjee. Mr. Chimagurti, if I could come to you as a equivalent source of major capital as far as the real estate sector is concerned. Also wanted to get your thoughts on what it is, again, that the government, what more can they do? What more can the RBI and the banks, as a whole do? And, developers, what else can they do to revive consumer confidence, to get more people to, more businesses to rent offices? Would love to hear your thoughts on that also.
So, with respect to, let's break it up into segments. First, let's talk about residential, right? The purchase of homes to a great extent is dependent upon how confident one feels about his future, right? It's based on the future income one is discounting and taking on the loan and buying a house, which is possibly one of the biggest purchase an individual does in his lifetime. That to a great extent is dependent upon the general well-being or the future of that individual, right? At this point of time, unfortunately, there is a lot of uncertainty because of the current environment, the way it is, right? Uh, Fundamentally, until unless somebody needs it desperately at this point of time and he has capital, very few people are buying the houses at this point of time. Any stimulus at this point of time is in a way not going to significantly improve the residential sales at this point of time, right? I think once there is some clarity which comes about vaccine in terms of there is stability, there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think at that point of time, government should come up with some things which need to be done to make it attractive for end customers to come and buy. Before COVID itself, most of the investors were out of the market. I think couple of tweaks which if the government does is basically it says that whatever is the interest which one is paying on the home loan, right? There is no capping in terms of interest uh, deduction for the tax purposes, right? If that does, at least it becomes attractive for customers to buy, look at the house from a post-tax perspective. Already, if you look at the affordability index, right, it is at 20-year low, which means it is possibly the best time in terms of income to the house prices for anybody to buy a house. Post the certainty comes in the environment and some small push by the government in terms of these interest tax waivers, etc. If they come in, I think the demand will come back. And plus, the government should ensure that they come up with some incentive in terms to front end the demand and say that this window of potential interest deduction on for income tax purposes is available for anybody who buys the house over, let's say, next 12 to 18 months, right? So people are front-ending the demand, which will improve the cash flows of the developer significantly, consequently improving the cash flows for NBFCs and the banks, which will improve their liquidity position, and the entire value chain will start seeing significant amount of cash flows, which will come in. I think that, and residential is clearly the biggest segment, and that's where the maximum amount of challenges which a lot of capital providers, whether NBFCs or banks, wherever they are facing, right? And that is addressed, I think, significant amount of issues with respect to the NBFC crisis will get resolved. And plus, it needs to be resolved in only two cities, right? It is Bombay and NCR, which account for 80% of the so-called stuck projects or the bank loans which are, or NBFC loans which are stuck. I think it's a very targeted approach, and this can be easily be done once one sees light at the end of the tunnel with respect to COVID.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chimakuti. There is some very interesting suggestions there. I mean, the fact that there's a correction in prices of residential properties across board, probably more so in some pockets where the prices were higher. And frankly, interest rates also are at an all-time low. Even people with existing houses are sort of renegotiating on their interest rates and getting a cheaper interest rate. So perhaps there is an opportunity there. It would be great to get Mr. Murali's thoughts on this now as a developer. So what more can developers do, if I can ask that specific question to you, to help boost consumer confidence, or is there not much that can be done and effectively we are in a situation where we've paused for the next few months till at least a vaccine comes in? And what else would you like to see the government do to help developers? Would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks, Kunal. Probably, first question I will say, the developers, what should they do? Developers should undo what all wrong they have done in the last 20, 30, 40 years. See, let us look at this business, very peculiar. You look at police is a home buyer, judiciary, people in the judiciary are home buyers, people in the media are home buyers, any civil servant is a home buyer, any politician a home buyer. All of them have negativity against developers. Why? It cannot happen. If one has negativity, it is fine. If everyone has a negativity on, developer, there is something seriously wrong with you. So developers have to undo certain things, which is very, very critical. So if they do not do it, whatever government does, it is not going to benefit at all. So developers have to start focusing on where their sweet spots are, where their capability lies, and just stay focused on that and deliver. And they should look at, they are here for next 30 years, 50 years. So, and home, somebody is buying, they are buying for 70 years, they are buying for 60 years, they are buying for 80 years. So we need to respect that sentiment, and we should not look at any shortcuts. So that's what developers should do. And they should, it is time has come now. Developers should identify. See, today, I have been very vocal in various forums, including CREDA and NAREDCO. Today, real estate, if you look at, you can say probably in the entire country, maybe about 50, 60 developers deliver about 90% of the market demand today. Now, there are maybe another 60,000 people targeting about 5 to 10% of the market today. Now, what all wrong? I know all the 50, 60 people very personally, they're all good friends. Maybe all of them or majority of them, they do not get into any wrongdoings. They do not indulge in any wrongdoings, and they have the right intention of delivering projects. But unfortunately, developer community is branded as bad because of maybe the other people who are taking care of this 5%, 6% supply, create a lot of discomfort. So it is time has come for developers, the good developers, to identify themselves as a different industry body. Then they could get some respect back, honor back. That's needed, much needed. I'm sure it is possible. With respect to the government, I will not say real estate alone. I'll touch upon government and what is happening on, because talked about housing. It's my pet subject on affordable housing, what's happening. So government, probably time has come now. This pandemic, COVID and all that is only a question of time. Maybe, next 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, we don't know. Only God knows. So, but it's out. We know that we are not living with this forever. It's a question of maybe 1 to 6 months time. So government can do only little for this COVID. I don't think, we should expect too much from the government. But government has to do certain things very, very different, which has nothing to do with this COVID. Time has come now today. See, it is about 70 years plus independence now. We are going to be on 73rd year of independence since we had independence. Now, maybe, first 40, 50 years spent on various things, 60 years spent on various things. Still, we are, treating every businessman as a crook, every businessman as a criminal, every businessman as somebody who's got a vested interest. That attitude has to change. So how do we change that attitude? India has been defined in the constitution. If you look at, there are 4 pillars which have been created. Now, time has come for us to create the 5th pillar. Who are the wealth creators for this country? And who are the economic contributors for this country? Which is nothing but entrepreneurs, nothing but business community. We need to identify them as the 5th pillar and give that same amount of trust what we give it to political side or judiciary or bureaucracy or media. I think time has come to identify them as a 5th pillar. How do we implement this? I would say probably 1956, whatever the constitution was written, just your law firm can help. Scrap entire thing. You write new constitution 2020. That is needed today. See, India has progressed a lot today. I'll tell you one example. There is a pandemic act. I do not know whether there was none of us knew until March 15th or March 22nd when COVID hit us. there is something called the Pandemic Act, which was drafted in 1847. Now, some state governments have taken that fight and amended this 1847 Act. In fact, I reached out to the chief minister and said, boss, now we should have enough guts to just scrap that Pandemic Act of 1847, put a fire on that Pandemic Act, which was drafted by British, not by Indians. Now you write a Pandemic Act of 2020. There are enough intelligence available today. Otherwise, if you just amend this act, what do? You put 2 commas and 2 full stops and 2 colons, nothing else you do. And somebody can come and chase you of how you are doing it wrong. The interpretation can go very, very deep. So time has come for us to scrap some of the acts. I would say probably rewrite the entire constitution. This is what, and keeping business community as the 5th pillar and do it is what I would say. When it comes to housing, affordable housing, there is a huge demand. Sanjay Dutt was talking about, luxury, there is a demand coming back and all that. I beg to differ on that. And people moving, to outskirts and having extra space. First quarter we have done, went phenomenally well. No site visits. April, May until June 22nd, there were no site visits. We had done about 400 bookings. So because of the sweet spot, affordable housing, there is a huge demand for affordable housing today in the country. Very little supply. As we speak today, the demand is much larger than supply today. So we need to focus where the business is. Luxury, I do not expect the business to come back in the next 3-4 years. But affordable housing, wherever we are operating, we see a very big demand. Hence, we are focusing on that. I see, ever green opportunity in affordable housing segment. So that's where our position is now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murli. Some very, very radical and different suggestions. I would love to take up that offer of rewriting the constitution, but unfortunately, nobody's going to listen to my law firm alone. I think that's a much larger task. Maybe that's a session on its own, sir. But very, very radical suggestions. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Vinamra, it would be great to get your thoughts in over here. I mean, specifically, of course, more from a commercial space, IT parks, logistics perspective, but even more generally on what do you feel are the changes required to sort of kickstart the real estate industry as a subset of the economy as a whole.
IT parks, people say that this work from home and
all. Sorry, sir. So that was for Vinamra Srivastava. No problem. Yeah.
But Mr. Murli, please, you can finish. I can go after you.
Okay, I'll just give you the work from home and all that is non-starter in India is my view, personal view. I don't think it'll ever be implemented. It's all temporary. When you have fever, you start praying God. But when you out of fever, you don't go to temple. So this is a, short-lived cycle. So we should have a habit of, going to the temple if you have belief throughout, not only when you have fever. This is, home and all that is just non-starter in India. I see a big potential. See, we have a tech park in Chennai. We have some commercial space in Bangalore and Calcutta. In the last 3 months' time, the response what we received, something phenomenal. And there has been some deals also got concluded. Only thing, people use this opportunity to negotiate a bigger deal. So that's the only thing. Probably better deal for them. Otherwise, no, the demand is huge. Leave it to you or my friend.
Thanks, sorry. Thanks, Mr. Murli. No, not at all. I think, Kunal, as far as commercial space is concerned, my sense is that the market forces will ultimately determine how and when the demand comes back to what level. I'm not sure if there's much that the government can do there. Of course, there are initiatives like juggling with the stamp duty rates or the ready reckoner rates, etc. But I don't think those can address the long-term fundamental requirements of the industry. Thankfully, I do think that the fundamental drivers of why commercial real estate has a bright future in India continue to remain strong. And that is driven by the need, especially because of high digitalization and digital transformation globally across industries, is going to continue to employ more and more work coming to India. The cost arbitrage, the availability of great talent, the still sub-dollar real estate cost, all of that continues to remain in the favor of the industry. So nothing fundamentally has changed in that sense because of COVID. So I do believe it is a matter of time before things get back on track as far as commercial is concerned. Yes, there will be some changes either pertaining to design of products or the way leases are negotiated, or maybe firms like yours will have to further strengthen the force majeure clauses and all of that. But I don't think any of that changes the fundamentals. And all of that is actually very well shown in the way the recent REIT listing is happening as we speak. And that just goes to show the confidence that investors have. Having said that, I would also caution that I think the investors' preference for now is more towards yield, and everybody would want to chase yields. So foreign capital for greenfield development projects, I think will take a bit of a hiatus unless there is pricing that is COVID adjusted. And so far, we haven't seen the crisis translate fully to adjustments of prices as far as, for example, land is concerned. But the hunt for yield assets will continue to remain very, very strong. Logistics is a very similar story. Given how e-commerce has boomed, logistics is going to continue to ride that chart. And I think that is a no-brainer. That was the transition already happening. It's only going to accelerate. Where the government can come in, my sense is to accelerate investment promotion and use this window of opportunity with the entire geopolitics tension with China and everything that's happening around the US and China. While on paper, we have seen a lot of articles about how India is going forward to try to grab a lot of that supply chain coming here. But I think more needs to be done in terms of attracting some of those investments to India through either policy changes, reducing approval timelines. You still, you can take anywhere from 1 to 1.5 years to get all the approvals before you even start a project, right? So there's lots that can be done on the ease of doing business front. Leapfrogging, not incremental changes. This could be a time for leapfrogging to really grab that opportunity. That can further accelerate investments in both these sectors, in my view.
Thanks so much, Vinamra. I mean, that's some really thoughtful suggestions there. I'm just going to give my 2 bits on, what I feel the government can do. This is a bit of a pet peeve for me. Hence, I've sort of started off this question. Advising international investors and domestic investors, both in the real estate space. I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is there is an absence of predictability. The market as a whole and the issues that people face are not predictable. So if the government can take certain macro steps, you mentioned leapfrogging, which will help making the process more predictable. I'll give you a few examples. Title insurance, for instance, is something which would be very useful. It's available in a lot of jurisdictions. It's not available in. I think if title insurance is encouraged and it's priced in a right manner, I think that will be a game changer as far as investments into the country are concerned. More so from the perspective of foreigners, but even from the perspective of Indian investors. And I think as a lawyer, the one other thing that I'll add, and perhaps we are just as much responsible, is certainty of outcomes as far as court process is concerned, because people are happy to price in risks. They need certainty and they need a clear timeline. So I think that those were my 2 bits, on what the government can do. And I think this government has the ability and the majority to be able to do it. So hopefully it should become a priority item, not just for the real estate sector, but, the economy as a whole. And we'll see some of those changes. I'm going to now get on to my, second bucket or second question, and try to get some more specific input on what we can do to make the real estate sector a more attractive investment destination. And of course, there is the commercial aspect over there, I think, which Vinamra, you alluded to. Arpito also spoke about that in the beginning. But there are a couple of buckets of the way people can invest in India, at least from a foreign investor's perspective. You can directly tie in with the developer. You can do something like a REIT. The AIF market is also opened up right now, where if you want to consolidate various assets and enter India, AIF is a great opportunity. So on this, if I can start again with Mr. Mukherjee, to just understand what are your thoughts on that. What can we do to make it more attractive for foreign investors, and any thoughts on specific structures that you would like to highlight?
I think one of the challenges we face is that India land is a state subject, so if I have to go to Karnataka versus Haryana versus Maharashtra, the local lay of the land is quite disparate. And to somebody coming from, overseas, just explaining those nuances and navigating that becomes complex. So I don't think we can change that. We've got to live with that. I think there are two, for us as investors, there are two key leakages. One is tax, and one is currency. I think on the currency front, the government has done a pretty decent job. Rupee looks stable. They've permitted the NDF market back. So, in terms of hedging, if they can deepen that market, that'll help at least investors like us who don't like to keep a open currency position. With regards structures, again, I think expand the jurisdiction. I think the tax folks need to maybe hire a PR sort of firm and do a little bit of better PR for themselves. That would really help, because the big bogey, the minute you talk to any of your folks, whether in Singapore or Hong Kong or US or London, is that, hey, will we be subject to a tax audit from India? And it's no, why don't you come through Singapore or through some other area? Rather, even Indo-US tax, if you come direct and you're a resident taxpayer in the US, it's a 10% withholding. But I'd rather pay 15 from Singapore, just because of comfort issues. So I think a little bit of not relying on polls who I'm not sure who answer those polls, where we keep leapfrogging the ranking in ease of doing business. Actually, sort of ground level guys. But that said, I think some of the bureaucrats are fairly progressive, open to dialogue, and I would like to believe that the needle is moving, and proof of the pudding is that a bunch of fairly storied investors are in India, have set up kind of large books. So moving in the right direction. I think if they can just do the two things that I said, continue to make sure that the currency behaves itself, and just put a kind of a little prettier face in terms of welcoming in. I mean, as Vinamr said, the timing is just absolutely perfect. The timing is absolutely spot on. So I don't think you need to do too much. Just be friendly and just not be draconian once the money has come in. I think everybody's really friendly when you're asking for the money to come in. But once the money comes in, certain sectors, I'm not an expert on some of those sectors, but some of the sectors we've just jammed the investors. Real estate so far has been pretty decent, and I think the future looks uncertain, but I don't think gloomy. That is my personal view.
Thanks, Arpito. That's some really interesting. Its future looks uncertain but not gloomy. I think most people would want to live with that thought. Everybody on this call for sure. Mr. Chunakurti, if I could get your thoughts on this, as somebody who manages such a large Indian fund.
Kunal, if you have a Friday evening calls, then I want everybody to be in the right frame of mind as we go into the weekend. So I think there has to be some.
Yeah. So Vikas, if I could get your thoughts on this, you've been in these markets for so long, you've seen it progressing and investment structures, strategies changing. What more can we do? What changes would make it easier, more attractive for the investor community as a whole?
So I think, Kunal, we need to break it up into two parts. One, what we need to do for foreign capital, and one, what we need to do for the domestic capital. I think if you were to...
because I'm so glad you mentioned that. I love the breakup and the fact that the interests are not always aligned. So right. I'm looking forward to hear you on this one.
So during this period, I was reading this book called The Anarchy by William Darling, right? About how Britishers actually took control of India, right? It started off more as a commercial enterprise, and it was a state enterprise in the guise of a commercial enterprise, right? All of us talk about what are the benefits which we need to give for foreign investors, but there is enough amount of capital which is there in the domestic investors who can go ahead and deploy capital. When we talk about foreign investors, we start crying and say that they are getting 10% withholding tax or 12.5% withholding tax when they start deploying capital as credit, right? There is so much amount of capital with the HNI investors. From the HNI category, there is nothing. So let's say today we have an AIF with foreign investors. The foreign investors who invest are exposed to 10% withholding tax or a 0% withholding tax, right? But a domestic investor, when he invests in an AIF and he gets interest income, he ends up paying 34-40% income tax, right? Why should there not be a level playing field for an Indian investor who invests in an AIF versus a foreign investor? Because ultimately the foreigners are making money at the expense of what revenues or profits which are being generated in India, right? So our capital is not domestic. Our capital is 95% of our capital is international, right? But the government needs to do something and recognize the fact that Indian investors also need to make money, right? So that's one. Second, let's talk about what is the elephant in the room and what is the immediate problem which is there. The immediate problem right now is to resolve the stress which is there in the NBFCs, right? And the challenges which they are facing. SBI Swami Fund, which was a great initiative by the government of India to go ahead and unlock the projects which were stuck, right? But one institution cannot go ahead and manage those kinds of number of projects, right? But there are a lot of capital providers like Arpito's firm or other international funds or domestic AIFs like us are not able to go ahead and do similar thing what SBI Swami Fund is doing, because they have the protection under IBC for recognizing if an entity goes in bankruptcy, their priority charge is recognized as per law. But for somebody like us or a foreign investor who invests capital, there is no recognition of our priority charge. It is treated as pari passu with the existing lender who's there, right? I think if that is resolved, I think significant amount of capital can come in. We can resolve stuck projects pretty fast, right? That's the second. Third is what we see is that there are a lot of NPAs which are there. Today, most of our capital is coming through an AIFs. We can't go ahead and buy loans to resolve some of these. So these are some of the changes which needs to be done more from for capital providers like us, which would enable us to deploy significant amount of capital more in the country.
Thanks so much, Vikas. I mean, this is a great time to mention, you specifically said that except the Swami Fund, AIFs as a whole don't get the superior treatment as, interim finance as far as the bankruptcy code is concerned. I'd like to mention here that, through another lobby, we are specifically working on amendments to the IBC to actually include all AIFs who have given basically rescue capital either pre-insolvency or in the insolvency process to be categorized as priority lending. Now, I'm not sure whether that amendment will be accepted by the government, but I just thought I'll let you know that that's under play, and hopefully it should come through soon. Mr. Murli, to come to you, it's really interesting. If I may just summarize the discussion from the last two panelists, there's almost competition between international funds and international financiers and domestic capital to fund the real estate market. So it seems like there is no lack of capital. Wanted to hear your thoughts. From what you previously mentioned, it's already a pretty attractive market. But what more can we do? Because there's always more that can be done around this space.
Government has done, quietly. It's not much talked about in the media yet. On July 9th, they have issued a notification that affordable housing projects, any investment coming for affordable housing from April 1st, 2020 to March 2024, if the money comes into the project level, there is a tax benefit 100%. If the money comes into the entity level, there is a income tax benefit and as well as dividend tax exemption. So quietly done, nobody talks about it. It is not even in the media in a big way. July 9th, the notification is coming. So government also is doing whatever I think they could do. But as Vikas said, lot could be done. Like, Swami Fund is one example. So if institutions like Kotak or other people are given a similar one, I think the capital can flow in a big way. and the serious amount of capital sitting here, domestic capital sitting here in India, big time. See, we are having, huge access for the capital. Capital is chasing today. In the last 2 months' time, the number of people have chased us, both foreign capital and as well as the domestic capital. Big number. So money is available plenty, but we need to put in our mouth where there is a demand. So we are fortunately placed in affordable housing segment, and we feel there is a very good demand and things are looking very, very good. So but government has to do certain things like short-term survival. Next 3 months time, I see at least about 10% of the players dying down. 6 months time, maybe about 30% of the players dying down. So if you can do something to make sure that they survive, then long term will be really good. Still, otherwise long term will be good, but those players will not be there. So that's the only concern today. But domestic capital plenty available. Probably something could be done. That's a very valid point.
Thank you. I wanted to get you in your. I mean, it seems like capital is a plenty, so maybe it's not a supply issue. It's more of a demand issue. And perhaps more needs to be done to create demand across the commercial space and the residential space. But what would your thoughts be on this?
Kunal, capital, yes, is plenty. There is a lot of liquidity, but let us also understand that the liquidity is chasing quality. I would call it targeted liquidity. Mr. Murali talked about the 50,000-60,000 of the tail end, right? And that is what is struggling, irrespective of asset class, for that liquidity. So a lot of times it does boil down to the basics irrespective of the asset class, the basics of how the developers are running their businesses, in terms of quality of the product, in terms of gaining trust of customers, whether it's retail customers or corporate customers. And if a lot of those cleanup happens, then I think half of the problem will sort out for itself. So if this situation means that there is some consolidation needed, some M&A needed, some distressed buyouts needed to clean up the industry, I think that's good for the industry. And that's one of the positive effects of a crisis like this. Macro environment also impact, especially for the foreign investors, their read of the market as well. And Arpita talked about currency. I couldn't agree more, right? If despite all the fantastic responses to the two REITs that we have today, right? If you actually look at the total shareholder returns, the dividend return is around 7% odd. You add growth to it, you reach 14-15% rupee returns. Singapore REIT market today gives you high teen dollar total shareholder returns. A lot of REITs give you more than 20% dollar returns, right? So as a foreign investor, what would I prefer in terms of not just TSR, but even in terms of ease of actually putting my money in, right? So it is great that we've taken those steps, but we must be cognizant that the response to foreign capital especially is not just driven by the fundamentals of the real estate industry. It is pretty much impacted by the macro environment. Currency is a part of it. Ratings are a part of that. The very fact that all international ratings continue to downgrade India does not give too much confidence as well to foreign investors, whether it is on aspects of contract enforcements, you talked about it earlier, or retrospective tax claims. We had a huge case study in telecom very recently on that as well. All of that is not healthy, irrespective of which sector is vying for the investment. The last thing I would say as far as domestic capital is concerned, especially in real estate, is while REITs have taken off now, I do think there is a huge need for education, especially if we want to pull in retail investors into REIT. Institutional investors have a battery of analysts and they exactly know what is the instrument about from a risk return perspective. Retail investors don't know that yet because we are not a mature market by any standard. So if we want retail investors to partake in the Indian real estate growth story, because right now the only way they can do it is either an HNI buying an office floor or a guy like you and me buying our apartment. Otherwise, I have no way to participate in the real estate industry. And REITs is fantastic for that. But for that to happen, huge amount of education needs to be done on where would you place this product from a risk return perspective in the spectrum of equity to fixed income. And as we know, it is somewhere in between, right? Yeah. If all of that happens, then I think I don't see competition between domestic and foreign capital. I mean, it's good that if they can both complement each other.
Thanks. That's very useful. We are short of time, but I'm going to ask you the next question immediately. And if you could sum up in maybe 2-3 minutes. What are the lessons from the NBFC crisis, the Alticos, the DHFLs of the world? What would you say we need to do to avoid that in the future? There have been this entire concept of ninja loans, lack of scrutiny of the underlying asset and things like that. But what would be your specific thoughts on that?
Now, a much more rigorous risk framework in the way deals like these are evaluated. I mean, it is easy for us to continue to blame the government and look at the government for bailouts, but who created the mess in the first place, right? It was lax underwriting. When everything is hunky dory, we have seen that in the early 2000s. Everything you touch, you think can turn gold. Right, and that's the trouble a lot of emerging markets face often in that chase for scale and growth, which emerging markets offer. Right, so I'm hoping that the industry learns and respects the need for much tighter scrutiny in the way risk is evaluated and priced in, and knowing very well that the future cannot be predicted in the way how government laws or how government implementation of those laws may change. So factoring all of those in the way we are pricing in risk and structuring deals is imperative. I mean, to me, to a large level, it is 101. It is business 101, right? But in the exuberance, we don't do that. So that prudence hopefully will make us smarter as an industry together. I don't think there's any dearth of quality of brain power, quality of capital, or quality of products that we can build in India. It is just we have to often caution our own optimism to be much more realistic when we are structuring and pricing deals.
Okay, cautious optimism. I'd actually call it skeptical optimism, but take your point completely. Vikas, your thoughts on this? What are the lessons that we can learn to avoid the issues that we've been facing? With the meltdown of the NBFC sector, large NPAs, well, not just in the real estate sector, but banks as a whole.
I think, Kunal, it's basic 101. I think, so you have to learn to control your greed, right? Whether in personal life or in professional life, right? Rome is not built in a day, and people will, it takes a lot of time to build institutions. The problem happened is that everybody thought that they can grow the book. And if they grow the book, the NBFC is listed, the stock prices was doing well, and that's how people started looking at it, right? So the disbursement was not looked at from the perspective of cash flows, and nobody thought about at the end of the day you need to get the money back, right? And the stock prices were doing well, and it's basic human greed. I think if that is something which an individual can control, I think he can do well in personally as well as professionally, and the institution which one is building it, right? It's ultimately it boils down to greed. I think that's the problem.
Arpito, I know we've spoken about this in the past, but 2-3 minutes, what your thoughts on this?
I mean, we have to kind of just look back and see that institutional investment in real estate is 14, 15 years old. So like any teenager, we will have growing pains. I think and this is one of them. This is one of the heartbreaks. First time a girl or a boy puts you down. So we will go through some of our growing pains. The key to it is how we learn and how we collaborate because we are a small industry, both in terms of investors and in terms of developers. We are very focused. We do only one thing: pour concrete on ground. So I think for us to collaborate, to learn, and to improve is far easier. Of course, we make it very difficult for ourselves. That's a different topic. But I think we will mature. We are becoming bigger, better, stronger with every crisis. And I truly believe that once we hit our 1920, we will be, a potent force to reckon with. So yeah, always positive. That's my thought.
Thanks, Arpito. Shelly, do we have some more time for further questions, or should we open it to the audience now? I realize it's around 3:47 already.
Yes, I think we can take some questions from the delegates.
So yeah, I'll open it up to the audience. I mean, if you all have any questions for any of us, if you can identify the person and ask the question.
Shirley, you will moderate wherever required. If you need to ask the question that's there in the chat box, please do that.
Yeah, Mr. Varun Sancheti had one question. Mr. Varun?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, hi, Shelly.
Yeah, hi. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, my question, one second. It was related to one of the sectors, which I was wondering if that could do well in the near future, because I feel like the flexible working spaces or adapting the regional spoke and hub model. I feel for the offices, it should be the near future, but I don't know if it could work in a country like India. So I work in a company as a development manager in London, and that's the way it has been adapted in the city. So how can that be taken in India?
I can try to take that, Kunal.
Yeah, Vinamra, why don't you go ahead?
That's okay. Yeah. You're right. Conceptually, I think barring the saga with the incumbent, which was more a global issue in co-working, I think it's not wise to paint the entire industry because of that one issue. Otherwise, the flexibility that flexible workplaces have been offering, especially in theory, I think are great in a post-COVID era and time, whether it is hub and spoke model or whether it is companies wanting to expand by dedicating a percentage to flexible and the rest of the percentage to core office. I do see all of that getting more steam, not in the short term. I think in the short term, the pain to the industry is severe. So I do think it will take time to recover, but the fundamentals are there. The only thing I would be careful about is the fact that everything like in life comes at a price. So flexibility comes at a price as well. And the question really will be, what are those balances that will enable, especially the operator of the flexible working places, to be able to make this sustainable. Even today, I can tell you on an operational cash level, there's hardly, very few you can name on your fingertips who may be breaking even, right? Others are not, probably 90, 95% are not. How long can that be sustainable, especially in the post-COVID painful era? I think will be the question. But those that, especially from the operator side, that can find that right balance, from a demand perspective, there is definitely a huge demand for it. How does the business model adapt to it? I think will be the challenge. Trying to balance the long-term liability of renting out a space from a developer for long-term, but giving it out on a short-term to the end users is the balance that will be needed. Those who get it right, I think will be successful. But the demand definitely will be there.
Thank you so much for that.
Shelly, we can probably move on to the next question if somebody has one.
I have not received any other question in the chat
So
box.
you
So I think
Can I ask one more question?
Hello.
Please?
yes, please.
Yes, I want to say something. Can I say?
yes, please.
You see, I'm speaking from Gurgaon. I'm seeing and listening that most of the office spaces is getting vacated and probably lakhs of square feet are not being used. Rental situation is very bad. I'm happy to listen few words from the persons who spoke today that this work from home is not going to continue for a very long time and work to office is very much needed. Against that, Google has already announced that they are ready to get the work from home for a very long time. So what is the future and fate of these office spaces which have already been created and how these spaces are going to be utilized in the near future? Thank you.
Vinamra, you want to take that one?
Yeah,
let's
sure.
hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks, Mr. Taneja. You're right in your observation, but I would also like to add that Google is also the company that has taken probably one of the biggest office spaces in these during the last 2 months in Bangalore at the same time. I think the jury is still out. Look, I won't even pretend to predict what's going to happen. I don't think anybody can do that. But what we are seeing is a blend of the optimal amount of flexibility that companies will want to look for in terms of work from home is concerned. So we are not going to see extremes where they may decide 40% of my workforce will never come to office, or the other extreme as well. What we are seeing is that probably 20 to 30% of the people may have flexibility of some kinds, either some days of week in the office or other models like that. So that there is far more options given to people instead of just saying, okay, you always work from home and you always work from office. Having said that, there are also counterplays in action. De-densification is already happening. Most companies, occupiers that are designing new spaces are increasing the amount of space per person. It had gone down to maybe 60, 70 square feet. Now we are only talking about 130, 140 square feet as well. So that then counterbalances as far as real estate space requirement is concerned. And on top of that, the overall pie continues to grow bigger as more and more work keeps coming to India on digitalization front. So there are all these counterbalancing forces in action, but our sense is that given the cultural context in India, and this question could be different for different geographies, and we are only talking about India, given the cultural context in India, and some of it was alluded to earlier with how the typical Indian IT worker in the age group of 20 to 35, which is bulk of it, treats his or her workplace, and not just as a workplace, as an avenue to actually socialize. All of those are very strong for India, despite the challenges of commuting to and from office. So we do believe that in the long run, that will come back, and the need for office space could be in different forms and shapes, different designs, but the need for office space, we remain quite bullish because of some of these reasons. It will take time before it materializes on the ground. So in the next 1 year, we shouldn't expect big bang announcements, even though some of them have happened. But ultimately, we do believe it to be coming back.
Okay. So I'll just give my views on this also, Mr. Taneja. And again, I'm now more as somebody, we have an office of around 300 people in Bombay. And the age group is largely from their mid-20s, As a whole, this is just a temporary situation. Most people are looking forward to come back to office simply because they like the distinction between work and home. And they would like the flexibility of working from home on occasions. I don't think I've met anybody who wants to work from home permanently. And I think, like Vinamra mentioned, a large part of social interaction, frankly, as far as the younger workforce is concerned, happens in the office. They do not really meet people externally besides their office because they spend so many hours in the office. So I suspect once a vaccine comes through or a genuine pill comes through, which can help, at least control the conditions or the suffering because of COVID, I think we're going to be back to a similar space that we were in earlier. But with some flexibility to continue working from home. And of course, this may not apply across all industries. Each industry may look at this separately. But a lot of interaction necessarily is much better in person. While technology is great and has helped in a big way, I don't believe we are in a situation where that personal interaction can be removed completely. Just to caveat, this is my personal view, not as a lawyer, because there's no real legal part involved in this, but I thought I should just contribute my 2 bits on this. I think there are a few more questions. Shelly, do you want to read them or should I go ahead and read them?
So now there's a question from Mr. Neeraj Sharma. He will ask him himself. Mr. Sharma.
Yeah, hi. So probably I'll direct my question to Mr. Murli, around, are you actually seeing some consolidation in the sector? Are any trend visible? Because this is something that we've been hearing for a long time. And I think all of us at least clearly know that not all the developers will really be able to, benchmark with the current expectation of the governance standards, etc. So any comments on that, Mr. Murli?
Yes, Neeraj. Consolidation is happening in a very, very big way today. As I said earlier, that 50-60 developers in the country contribute about 90% of the demand today. Probably that can go up to maybe 95%. So today only big brands are selling. Nothing else is selling. Probably this 50-60 across the country, If you go, India is, people think it's complicated. It's simple actually. There are only 9 cities in India you should count on real estate today. It's Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Bombay, Pune, NCR, 3 cities, Noida, Delhi, Gurgaon. If you take these 9 cities, this takes care of about 80% of the market in the entire country. So for example, for Capital Land or Arpito, they don't even visit the remaining cities. The 9 cities itself, they choose sometimes not to visit. So this is how real estate is happening. And also for the domestic players, see, I've been addressing a lot of real estate, our developer forums. A lot of people come and ask, tier 2 cities, not now, I've been talking about last 20 years, I've been seeing, 15 years I've been seeing, tier 2 cities, can we get some money? Nobody has been paying any attention to providing capital for the tier 2 city. Now, other than these 9, except now some NBFCs came in and trying to show that they are heroes. Yes, I'll give you money tomorrow. They have gone bankrupt today. So this is the reality today. So these 9 cities make all the difference. And if you take every city, maybe about 10 to 15 developers max. Again, they contribute about 90 to 95% of the market. So if you take 50, 60 developers across the country, maybe about 8 to 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 developers in each city matters. That's it, nothing else. So this is shrinking further and further. So major consolidation is happening. I do not know whether it is good for the industry. It is good for Shriram Properties, but may not be good for the industry. Hence, we need to do something to make sure that large number of people survive. It's otherwise, I expect the prices to go up now. We have already increased the price in the first quarter by, I wanted to increase by 10% by marketing team had a lot of hesitation. We increased the price by 5% in the first quarter. Now, the second quarter, we are increasing by another 5% now. So consumer will be the loser. But as we said, the governance is one, everyone, it is not that everyone cannot live with. See, governance is what, I think Arpita was earlier saying, how do you conduct yourself? It's or Vikas was talking about, there is a limit for our greed. Likewise, there is a way of living. So, we all read Bhagavad Gita every day, but unfortunately, 90% of the people do not practice even 1% of what is taught. So just stick to the basics. That's all governance all about, which people are not doing it. They are paying a price for that. But unfortunately, consolidation is a big way today. That's where the truth lies now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murli. Shelly, do we have time for one more question or do we have to wrap up?
I think we can take one more question last.
Yeah, so I think there's a question from from Lakshmi Narsimhan. How can technology providers help revive the real estate industry in India? Vinamra, do you want to take that on technology providers and how it can help revive the real estate industry? If you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's probably a bit far-fetched to say technology can revive the industry. I think the industry's revival is with far greater factors. But what I will say is that technology is certainly revolutionizing the industry. I've already seen how homes are being sold without any, site visit. Mr. Murli was even talking about it. I've already seen how drone shots and drone videos, and I'm doing that myself for one of our properties. We're doing the entire walkthrough purely through drones and virtually. So I think in that sense, the crisis has pushed to a lot of transformation, both in the residential and commercial sector, and PropTech, which was already over the last 2 years gaining traction, is going to get accelerated across the value chain. Right from the way land diligence is being done, to construction technologies, to COVID-proof technologies for operations, making everything touchless. So a whole lot of gamut of new areas, I think, across the real estate sectors are going to get accelerated, which is great for the industry. But I wouldn't go ahead and say that that's going to play a part in the revival of the industry. I think that is driven by much more macro factors.
Thanks, Vinamra. So I think we're above time, so maybe it's time to wrap it up. I genuinely thank all the panelists for joining this, and of course Vicky for organizing this, and Tata Realty being the main sponsor. I wish we could do more of these, but I realize that it's quite difficult to get the time from all the panelists. So thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for all the attendees who asked this question and who patiently heard us. So that's it from our end. Shelly,
Kunal, can I just respond to Mr. Murli's comments?
Yeah,
that I don't go to tier 2 cities.
Sure,
Mr.
please.
Murli, if you, one of the reasons was fragmentation. As you mentioned, you're consolidating, and as you consolidate and more consolidated and organized players expand their footprint, we'd be happy to get into a car and go to some of the cities with you, sir.
I did not get your last sentence. I don't
We
get
lost.
the sentence.
No, I think
I
Mr.
said,
Murli,
sir,
yeah, go ahead.
I said, sir, that as you consolidate and become more organized, and the fragmentation which is there in tier 2, tier 3 cities becomes more scale, we'd be happy to get into an Innova with you and visit any city that you like us to visit.
Nirja, there is a potential case for brokerage from Mr. Murli, just in case
Right.
it happens. I thought I'd mention.
So I know where to approach for my next sponsor. No, fantastic. This was a great session. The subject matter experts were so willingly sharing their strategies and expertise with all the delegates here. Thank you very much, Arpito, Murli, Vinamra, Ms. Vikas, and of course, a moderator for the day, Mr. Kunal Shah, for so beautifully conducting the session. With this, we come to the end of our session. I would once again like to thank our sponsors, Tata Realty, and of course, Trilegal, for supporting this program. Thank you all the delegates for joining us today. I hope you found the session meaningful, and we look forward to connecting with you once again with something even more interesting again. Thank you very much for all of you. For absolute pleasure having you with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.